We is here this afternoon to put to shame the fugitive slave law. This law what says that escaped slave found in Boston, Philadelphia, or anywhere is the right and property of the slaveholder and can be chartered back like bondage. This is an unchristian law. It is against the will of God.
April 21st, the deed is done. Blake followed our false fire on shore, and his ship broke apart on the rocks off Spivey Point. We were aided by an unearthly fog that rolled in as if heaven sent, although God had no part in our actions tonight. Blake's gold will be recovered tomorrow, but may the Lord forgive us for what we've done. I couldn't read any further.
Your grandfather had a way with words.
Our celebration tonight is a travesty. We're honoring murderers.
Chris Skelzer here with
Matt Howell.
On this episode of The First Run, Matt and I are flush with cash. So we decided to buy our way into the Sundance Film Festival. Now, Matt saw a few more films than I got to see, right? So Matt and I are going to discuss Censor, 8 for Silver, and of course, the Nicolas Cage latest magnum opus that is Prisoners of the Ghostland. And then from there, Matt will fill us in on the rest of his Sundance trip from his comfortable couch at home. We'll tell you also what's coming up in physical media, featuring your streaming and straight-to-DVD picks of the week. And then finally, we will wrap up our favorite films of 2020, this time, of course, going 5 through 1. Now, giving the freshness of all these films, Matt, these are all premieres. There really aren't any clips available on the interwebs for us to play. So we're going to kind of just randomly go through it. We'll see what we end up coming up with here. All right, first up is Censor. Matt, why don't you tell the fine folks at home, what is Censor all about?
All right, so it's 80s England. A young woman is a censor for, I guess, like the British version of the MPAA, basically watching these things that they called video nasties, these straight-to-video horror films, and eliminating cuts to make sure that they are available to release to the wider public. She starts watching a video, and she sees that there are events that reflect back to a childhood trauma involving her and her sister, and it starts to drive her mad as she looks for answers.
That works for me. So, Matt, out of all the films we were going to discuss, this is the one I was most excited about. That's right in my wheelhouse. You know, the late 70s, early mid-80s horror films, the video nasties, if you will. Your films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Evil Dead, right? All that stuff fell under that umbrella. And I also think that this is an era just ripe for use. The atmosphere at the time as well was particularly crazy. Now, you're a lot younger than me, so you may not remember this, but there were a lot of concerns about that stuff. There was a real fear in this country of like satanic cults sacrificing people in the woods.
I do remember that. I do remember the satanic panic for sure.
Exactly. So, I mean, it was really, I think the 80s was the real last gasp of our puritanical mindset here, and I would guess and say in the UK. So I was really kind of looking forward to this one, Matt. And overall, I think the film works. I think our star, Neem, does a great job. She is our lead censor, if you will, right? And it goes through and I think pays a nice homage to the whole era, as also the mystery of this film kind of unravels, right? I think that the main character dealing with her own personal tragedy and how it's influenced her life, and how it then the film she watches kind of, this one particular film triggers kind of these memories, right? And kind of brings the trauma all the way back up. And it starts to warp, I think, her already fragile reality. And as the film progresses, our character Enid falls deeper, I think, deeper into madness. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this film. I think the color palette is very reminiscent of your Argento films, right? Some Carpenter, some Cronenberg, some Raimi. So there's homages to these legends all over the place. Especially there's some dead-on like lifts from Raimi and Argento films in this movie as well. The only thing, a couple things they had at the end, I don't know has the impact that I think the director Prano Bailey Bond hopes for. It doesn't really hit with the force I think that the rest of the film kind of builds to. And if I'm quite honest, Matt, I'm curious your thought. I don't think it's nasty enough.
Yeah, so this was an interesting film. I think this thing does, especially for the first half hour or so, really does a masterful job, in my opinion, of kind of building the sense of foreboding and really setting the mood. Like you're almost in this modern version of like a cross between like a video nasty / a gothic horror film, you know, where it's basically this kind of oppressive air is just kind of like permeating everything that you're watching on screen. And I was really on board with that. I really liked that developing atmosphere. And I do appreciate that a lot of this stuff is left for interpretation, or you kind of got to fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm kind of with you. Like I was expecting something much wilder. And, you know, the reference to the video nasties, I mean, the stuff that you see is almost all the stuff that she's watching. It's not really a part of the movie. It's like, it's what's the term I'm looking for here? It's basically like a story within a story, but you know what's going on that she's watching is generally not real. So it kind of undercut that a little bit. And I'm with you. Like, I think the director leaves a little bit too much for the audience to guess. And I think if he was going for that kind of gory, explicit content, like he fails terribly at this, because like there's just all kinds of stuff that literally like subliminal cuts of what's actually going on. I don't know if it necessarily works.
Yeah, it's just to clarify, Prano Bailey Bond is a woman, but yes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's quite right. So it's just, it may not, as I said, deliver, I think, the ultimate impact that she's going for, but I think it's still eerie and effective enough. And though the ending doesn't really have the punch I was hoping it would, I still appreciated the film as a whole. And I think it does its British roots proud. I think it's a nice kind of modern representation of those classic British horror films. So I ended up giving Censor a B+.
Is you okay? I don't know if it was just the sheer volume of these films that I was watching for over the past few days, but I ended up giving Censor a B-.
Fair enough. All right, that works for me. Let's see what's next. 8 for Silver. All right, man. So 8 for Silver. I'll break this one down. We have what do we have here? Basically, it's a grouping. It's a village type thing. We have the baron, the rich guy, and the manor on the hill, and then there's some people that are settlers in his area trying, I guess, kind of to build a town. And there is a bunch of gypsies come through and lay claim to this guy's land, saying, listen, this was ours. It was stolen. We want to stay and settle here. And him and his crew basically go in and kill them all. And in fact, they set up and crucify one of the gypsies, and then his mom, sister, I'm not quite sure, but the matriarch, I think, of this clan places a curse on the family and the settlers there. And this is basically a reinterpretation of the werewolf legend. Now, 8 for Silver, Matt, I felt had a lot of great ideas. I think there has also been, a dearth of werewolf films over the last few years, generally. I think with the big one, and I confess I've not had seen, that gets a lot of attention is Ginger Snaps, which is a Canadian film that's supposed to be really good. And then there was, of course, the attempted relaunch with Benicio del Toro about, 10 years ago? Of the
Yeah, maybe
Wolfman,
longer. Hmm.
I'm a fan of Neil Marshall's Dog Soldiers, but I'm really grasping for any other interpretations. What there was Teen Wolf, right? I guess on MTV.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the werewolf is an underserved monster. So I'm always curious to see when another film rolls around. I think the problem with Eight for Silver for me, Matt, is that it reaches to be more than a horror film. There's some commentary about imperialism and its consequences. We spend a lot of time dealing with family and duty. We have this moment of a marriage on the rocks, I guess. But all of these things are passing glances. And nothing ever quite measures up to be a real controlling narrative of the film. It runs a bit long for my taste as well. But I will say, in the film's defense, conceptually, I love the idea of the monster. And what they come up with for the werewolf was new and interesting. And conceptually, I liked it a lot. There is an homage, again now, to this time to The Thing, where there's this autopsy scene that I think works well. And I will say, it is scary. There are a lot of times, especially the first 40 minutes or so, I think, of what felt like 4 hours of this film that is actually really, really effective. And I had some truly edge-of-my-seat moments of this thing. But there's too many long spans in between of this, for lack of a better term, action when we're dealing with, the ramifications, the werewolves stalking people, the attacks, the hunts, all that stuff. There's still a lot of too much chatty stuff. So the problem, it tries to be more ambitious and it just doesn't pull that off. Though I think there's enough here to keep you entertained if you like your kind of old school gothic. This is set obviously hundreds of years ago. Your old gothic kind of British horror films. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I quite enjoyed this film. I think it's quite effective as far as, scares. I think of the kind of pseudo horror films that I saw for this, I thought it had the most kind of edge of your seat moments, like the sense of dread that it kind of builds on. And it's heavy with atmosphere to its benefit in a lot of parts of the film, and in others, maybe not so much. I agree with you. It is a interesting juxtaposition of this creature monster film with a gothic horror film. Gothic films are usually very more subdued. Things are more hinted at. So it's kind of the war between those two things that I think is effective sometimes, whereas it maybe isn't in other parts of the film. But overall, I quite enjoyed it. I thought the creature effects were pretty good, considering what I assume is a pretty small budget. The gore in it is probably the goriest film that I saw out of all of these. They're all pretty effective. Yeah, I thought it had a lot of really interesting ideas and twists on the kind of werewolf mythos and the curse. And I mean, even just having the gypsy curse is just like straight out of the Wolfman kind of thing. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite strong, and I think it's it does have its shortcomings. It is a little long in places. It does, especially at the climax. I don't know if it kind of rushes towards its ending after kind of meandering for large parts of the movie, but overall, I really liked it.
Fair enough. What'd you end up giving 8 for Silver?
I gave it a B+.
We were exact opposites. I certainly did. Fantastic. All right.
Okay.
What is going on next?
Oh, different.
Wait a minute. That wasn't press here. All right, Matt. Next up was the one that is supposedly destined to be the cult classic out of Sundance. Of course, I think that's a term that's brought up every time Nicolas Cage makes a movie at this point. I don't know if that's just his PR people just pushing that into the ether. I'm not quite sure. But next up, we have Prisoners of Ghostland. So since you're going to run through the next segment, I'll spare you and I'll attempt to describe what Prisoners of Ghostland is all about, though I make no guarantees. So Nicolas Cage is a notorious criminal, and what happens is he robs a bank with a buddy of his. His buddy goes crazy and kills everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And then cut to him being locked in a cage in this, what appears to be some adult theme park in this post-apocalyptic world. And since has this reputation of being this ultimate badass, the governor of this town, played by Bill Moseley, doing Bill Moseley as he possibly can, and elicits his help, saying, "Listen, I'll let you go, but what happened is one of my kids here escaped." And now kids I'm using colloquially. I'm not quite sure in what capacity he is. I think she's a kidnapped child that he grew
Sure.
and who knows to do with what. So he sends him out into the world to bring her back. And he runs afoul of this group of people who are trying to survive in this offshoot village. There's some toxic radioactive zombie ghosts. And Nick Cage has this sort of Escape from New York-esque exploding suit that focuses on both of his arms, his neck, so obviously to blow up his head, and then naturally his testicles in case he gets a little randy with the young woman when he attempts after he rescues her. And I guess that's kind of it. It's weird. I mean, the first note I have here, Matt, is ... what? Well, I guess if you were curious what was happening in the other parts of the world in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, now we kind of know what was going on, like in Japan, I guess, while Max is in Australia hanging out with Tina Turner in Thunderdome. So now we know what happened there. What are your thoughts? I think I've led for the most part, Matt. Break down Prisoners of Ghostland. Is this destined to be the next Nick Cage classic, or is this just another? What are we doing, man?
Yeah. So I'm not going to bury the lead here. Well, first off, I will say that I'm not particularly familiar with this director, Sino Sanao or something like that. But I guess has this reputation as being this like crazy auteur of Japanese cinema, and his films are just like wildly out there. So I guess this is supposed to be along the lines of that. But when you put Nicolas Cage and this director who's supposed to have this crazy oeuvre and the sensibility, and you describe it to me as an exploding suit, samurais, post-apocalyptic, like I'm thinking I'm going to get Mandy like crossed with Mad Max. Like I think I'm going to get something like Mandy. And that's not what this is. No. This is a lot of talking. This is so much exposition and like these off the wall characters who just kind of show up for like no reason. This is this director's first film in the English language, but he uses a lot of Japanese actors, obviously, because it's supposed to take place in Japan, as far as I can tell. And even though they're speaking English, I had to put the subtitles on because I couldn't always understand them because they were yelling a lot, and like I just couldn't really grasp all the nuances of what was going on. It's a very convoluted story, but there's all these threads that he like introduces and he never does anything with it. Like, there's this prisoner bus full of irradiated criminals and they like show up for like 30 seconds of the movie. Like, but that's like supposed to be like one of the major through points of the whole thing. Right. And honestly, there's just not enough Cage in this. Like, there's just like Cage is way reined in. There are some him screaming testicle at the top of his lung is fantastic.
That's good. Yeah.
And him saying hi fucking ya while he's trying to fight people off with his karate is amazing.
I can tell you, I desperately wanted to find that as a clip and I couldn't find it.
Me too.
Someday.
I was like, I almost texted you hi fucking ya and just left it at that. But overall, I mean, I think there's like one action sequence at the end, and yeah, it's really not what I was hoping for. I was incredibly disappointed with what I got out of this.
Yeah, a lot of my notes are similar. Like you, I'm unfamiliar with Sion Sono's work. I understand he is rather prolific and an interesting artist who's known for these kind of crazy, unusual films. And I enjoyed parts of this thing. I like Cage's bomb suit, even though it was kind of cheap looking at times. Right. Conceptually, I like that idea. I think I like that the people that are working to freeze time by constantly pulling on the minute hand, right? The toxic zombie ghost things are cool. The adult theme park that Bill Moseley is running. And one thing I actually was really interested in is Tak Sakaguchi's Yasuhiro, who was the bodyguard guy for the governor. I'd like to see a whole film series on that guy. They give you a little exposition on him, why he took the job, right? And his sister's there, well, you should just leave, that type of thing. But he was one of the more interesting characters of this entire thing. And I will admit what you said before, there's lots of talking. And I'm literally thinking as I'm watching this film, with all these different elements that you say that Sono brings into the film that never really go anywhere, all these different threads that never get pulled together, as I feel like that was a purposeful choice. I think that Sono wants to keep this film as chaotic as possible. He wants us to be unbalanced and unmoored the entire time, right? It's a jumbled mess. And I feel like that's exactly what he was going for. But I had a hard time making heads or tails of the whole thing. And one of the biggest sins I think the film has is the action or the lack thereof it. It's fleeting, and even when it happens, it's dull. In today's kind of martial arts action world, I need a little more. I've been John Wicked out, right? I mean, or The Raid. I mean, I don't know what it is. I need to get the next big hit. If I have see stuff that's below that level, I'm kind of like meh at this point. And again, maybe that's a conscious choice by Sono, more concerned with keeping us off balance and confused than he is with telling a compelling, thrilling narrative. If that's your artist's choice, I guess I'll tip my hat to you, but maybe it's just not for me. Half the film I felt existed just to disorient. So I don't know. I have nothing really more to add to that. I think you're entirely right. And Cage is so muted in this film. Outside of those couple lines, it is basically just a disappointment. I ended up giving Prisoners of the Ghostland a C-, and I think I'm being a little charitable.
I gave it a C- as well. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it was the one that I was the hardest ticket to get. I had to just happen to see that there was a showing available. It ended up being my least favorite film of the entire thing. It was not good. Not good.
So there you go, folks. So those are the three films that Matt and I both were able to check out at Sundance this year. If you've seen any of them, shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. What we're going to do now is transition into the physical media picks. We'll tell you what's coming up. And then we'll come back to Matt as he fills us in on the rest of the films that he got to see. I guess family and work responsibilities be damned. All right. So let's talk about what's coming up this upcoming Tuesday, February 9th.
Please come with us.
No.
Why are you being so stubborn? Just come.
You'll die here, Dale. Of course I will. Today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, don't make no difference to me. My Mary went to heaven in this place. And when the good Lord's ready for me to join her, I'm going to be right here in this place, too. Bags packed.
So it's a disaster film with nary a Roland Emmerich in sight. Matt, Greenland is being released, includes Gerard Butler, Morena Baccarin, has some deleted scenes and audio commentary and a making-of featurette. This one's actually supposed to be pretty entertaining, so maybe we should try and catch up with it at some point. Also being released is a film that I may talk about a little later, which is, of course, a film we haven't seen for the show yet. I got to see it at the drive-in, which felt kind of, in a way, perfect. And Matt hasn't seen it, but we'll pick it up at some point. And that is the body swap thriller Freaky with Vince Vaughn. Includes audio commentary, deleted scenes, and a couple making-of featurettes as well. Scream is releasing Sputnik on Blu-ray, which is that Russian alien kind of horror film that we talked about. You can see that. Check out that episode about, 2 months ago, I think, at this point, if not a little longer. But you can now pick that up. Arrow is releasing the El Duce tapes. Between appearing in supporting roles in General Hospital and local TV commercials, Ryan Sexton spent the early 90s documenting the life and art of El Duce, lead singer of the notorious shock rock band The Mentors. Famous for taking the stage in black executioner hoods, the band spent a few moments in the national spotlight after some of the most offensive lyrics were denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate. 25 years later, David Lawrence and Rodney Asher dive into the long-unseen VHS footage, searching for clues about who El Duce really was. How much of his disturbing persona was for real, and what an act built around a cartoonish sense of violent misogyny can tell us about our own time and place. I don't remember any of this. I'm not sure if you do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Fair enough. So Arrow's bringing that, the brand new audio commentary with the El Duce Tapes crew, a 34-minute illustrated audio conversation with some of the people involved, freestanding alternate assembly of the unused material known as the more El Duce tapes. I mean, this thing's fully loaded. So if you have any idea what El Duce is and you're all about it, Arrow's released the version for you. Wander Darkly, featuring Sienna Miller and Diego Luna. New parents, Adrian and Mateo, are forced to reckon with trauma amidst their troubled relationship. They must revisit their memories of their past and unravel haunting truths in order to face their uncertain future. Happy Times from Artsploitation Films is being released. A seemingly friendly dinner party erupts into a night of violence and terror at a lush Hollywood estate. Code Red is giving us Devil's Express, also known as Phantom of the Subway, with a brand new 2K restoration of the film starring Warhawk Tanzania, which is one of my all-time favorite names, The Right One. In this heartfelt and hilarious rom-com, Sarah, a novelist struggling with writer's block, needs inspiration and finds it when she serendipitously, I wasn't sure I was going to get through that, meets Godfrey, a down-on-his-luck oddball who constantly changes personas and alter egos in order to cope with his past and avoid reality. Gravitas Ventures releases 3 films, Sung for Our People, Before, During, After, and Hal King. New to Blu-ray, Criterion is giving us The Parallax View. The Warren Beatty film features a brand new 4K restoration, new introduction by the filmmaker Alex Cox, interviews with director Alan J. Pakula, a new program on cinematographer Gordon Willis, and more. Paramount Presents gives us Elizabethtown, Matt. This is the Cameron Crowe film. I gotta admit, I'm really never got into the whole Cameron Crowe. I still haven't seen, what's his big film, the big first one he did, the
Almost
with
Famous?
the band. Yes.
Almost Famous?
I've
I
never seen
love
it.
Almost Famous. I love Almost Famous.
I'll have to catch up with that at some point. So that's getting a Paramount release. Love Story also from Paramount Presents, a brand new 4K restoration of that. Full Moon Features is giving us one of the great 80s kind of B horror slasher films, Tourist Trap. It's an uncut version which features Chuck Connors and Tanya Roberts. I don't know if you're familiar with Tourist Trap. It's about a group of friends who get kind of stuck at a roadside museum that's filled with mannequins.
Okay.
And it's just weird, unsettling, atmospheric horror film. If you haven't seen Tourist Trap and you're a horror fan, you should check it out. Warner Archive is giving us A Tale of Two Cities, a Charles Dickens film. Dark Force Entertainment is releasing a pair of films. Blue Monkey, also known as Insect from 1987. And then some martial arts classics, air quotes, The Black Dragon and Enforcer from Death Row. Mono Macabro is giving us Panic Beats from 1983 from Paul Neshe. And then Kino Lorber is releasing a bunch of stuff, Matt. So Evil My Love from 1948, Jazz on a Summer's Day from 59, Wings of the Hawk from 53, The Suspect from 44, Man of the East from 1972, and then a double pack of Man from Del Rio from 56 and The Ride Back from 1957. If you're a Steelbook fan, Scream Factory is releasing their version of My Bloody Valentine. This is the 1981 classic, which includes the uncut version of the film. 4K, Matt, we're getting releases of Elysium, the Matt Damon film, and then 13 Hours. And then your straight to DVD pick of the week, Matt, I'm going with Sex Terrorists on Wheels. When a biker gang terrorizes Esperanza County, Ennio, a Texas Ranger undercover as a badass outlaw biker babe, teams up with old Ezra, the blind sniper hermit, and his seeing eye coyote, Max. They bring the reign of terror to a bloody end. What should we be streaming this week?
So I'm going to recommend, kind of in advance of Valentine's Day, A Single Man, starring Colin Firth and Julianne Moore. It takes place in the 1960s. Firth plays a gay English teacher who is still reeling from the death of his boyfriend or long-term partner, and kind of determining that he just is finding it hard to move on from that. It's kind of the thing. It's really one of the films that kind of put Firth on the map as far as like a serious actor to be reckoned with, and it's quite good as far as a kind of morose love story or lost love story. That's worth checking out. It's available on Netflix.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks, let's keep rolling then, and let's get back to Maddie Does Sundance. And what's coming up next? Let's find out. Matt, what is First Date all about, and what are your thoughts?
All right. So, First Date is about a high schooler named Mike. He has a crush on his next door neighbor, Kelsey, who is a kind of like this badass karate chick. And
Sure.
he finally works up the courage to ask her out on a date, but man, he doesn't have a car. So he gathers up what little bit of money that he has and buys a car from a 65 Chrysler from a really shady dude. And it turns out that there may be more to this car than meets the eye, because suddenly he's being pursued by a band of criminals, the cops, and all kinds of different folks trying to get their hands on that car. It's kind of like one of these action comedy films, bit of a thriller. It's funny in parts. The action is okay. It is kind of seem very amateurish for the most part, and some of the choices in it are really weird. Like, a lot of the scenarios could be solved if Mike just told the truth or just kind of came clean with what was going on. And then just like weird spots, like for some reason, the people who used to own the car, this old couple just shows up out of nowhere and just like takes it on a joyride. So it's not a particularly good film, but I will say that I was generally entertained while I was watching it. I don't think it's groundbreaking in any way. The jokes are a little too far and few between, and they don't necessarily always land. And the action after a while starts to get kind of repetitive and straining the good taste of verisimilitude for, just kind of stretch out the running time. But it's an overall an okay movie. I'd give it a C personally.
So they describe it basically as Superbad meets True Romance. Is that kind of dead
Yeah,
on?
I would not call that accurate at all. I mean, I guess in the most sense of the skeleton of those frameworks, but both of those are vastly superior films. If you're looking for something of that quality, you're not going to get that here.
All right. Let's see. Okay, let's find out what's next.
Okay.
John and the Hole.
Okay, so this is one of the more contentious films. I think out of all of the films that I saw, this one is the only one with a negative Rotten Tomatoes score right now. And on things like Letterboxd, it is very, very poorly reviewed by the people who did manage to see it. So this is actually by the writer of Birdman, which is a film that we generally enjoyed. And it's based off of a short story or novella I'm not particularly familiar with it called John in the Hole, where essentially a young adolescent named John, who's 13 years old, discovers an unfinished bunker in the woods behind his house. And he decides that he's going to drug his parents and his sister and put them in the hole while he lives out a Home Alone fantasy of his own, where he's basically going to act the way he wants to act and do the things that he wants to do.
It sounds like a fun idea for a movie, actually.
Yeah. So the thing with this is that it's very deliberate. It's very quiet for the most part. The teenager lead, he is it's very believably awkward 13-year-old, and it's kind of uncomfortable to watch him after a while because he's just so sociopathic and just kind of awkward in the way he does things and just things that he pulls off. It's actually a little sad. We're juxtaposed with what's going on in the hole and the family dynamic there and like what's going to happen. And then there's this whole like B story, which I don't understand what it's about this woman who's telling the story of John in the Hole and then abandons her like 12-year-old kid, which is also very strange. That goes nowhere. So it's got a lot going on, and then it just kind of ends. So I think that's what a lot of people had with it. I think a lot of problems people had with it was just how uncomfortable the main character makes you feel just kind of watching it. It's very cringe. And just the fact that, not a whole lot happens and it seems to just kind of quietly go nowhere. But I actually kind of enjoyed it. I think they really nailed the kind of awkward adolescence, maybe even sociopathic awkward adolescence, but not like in a sense of like he's a killer. He's just weird and he doesn't know how to deal with these kinds of things. So I ended up giving it a B-, but I'm certainly in the minority of people out there who saw this film.
Fair enough. All right, now, I know what you've seen. I'm curious to see what's going to come up next. Oh, okay, good. This is what I'm really curious about. Now, I've been a fan of Ben Wheatley's work, Matt, for the most part, though I think the last few films haven't met with the same acclaim that some of his earlier work has. So tell us about In the Earth.
Yeah. So topical. Takes place in the UK. There's some kind of mysterious pandemic that has caused everyone to be kind of sequestered into their own homes. A scientist ventures to a quarantine zone in a forest and like a national park, as far as I can tell, and says that he's going to go out and meet another one of his colleagues who he has closely worked with on her experiments on plants deep inside the forest, and he's going to be let out there by a park ranger. As they kind of go through the forest, they encounter another individual who turns out he may not be all that he seems to be, and he may not be the most safest person to be around. And as they progress, it kind of becomes this kind of are people in the woods crazy kind of thing, being like locked out from society and away into the deep wilderness. It's a really strange and psychedelic film. There's a lot of commentary on what kind of isolation does to people, which is, I guess, fitting for the time it took place, especially in this current time where people are trapped inside for extended periods of time. There's kind of a nature ethos to it. Like possibly is there like a creature in the woods or some kind of pagan god that kind of is influencing these events. So there's all this kind of stuff going on. And it got a lot of, especially as you get towards the end, it's got a lot of these psychedelic images where basically, you're not quite sure what's going on. There's a lot left open for interpretation. Again, I don't think this is necessarily a return to form for Ben Wheatley. I don't think it still reaches the heights of his earlier films, but it is something that I could see myself watching again. It's kind of stuck with me. It really depends on your tolerance for like just really out there, surrealistic type of film.
So what'd you end up giving it?
I gave this one a B- as well.
All right. There were two films that I didn't get to catch up with, and that was one of them.
Okay.
So, all right.
Yeah, I'll be interested on your take on it. I wouldn't go out of your way to try and find it right now, especially right now. But yeah, if you can get it for relatively reasonable, or if it's unavailable on a streaming service, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Will do. Sounds like a plan. All right, next. Oh, all right. This was the other one. Strawberry Mansion.
Okay, this is a weird one. So basically, this takes place in a near future where the government, for whatever reason, for reasons not really explained why, but they tax your dreams. And every night you have to put in this little chip into a reader, and they tally up what you dreamt about and assess a tax bill that is due to you. The main character of this, he is a tax assessor for the government. He decides that he gets an assignment to go out and audit a woman who has not paid her taxes in decades. And he goes in to find that she has thousands of not only of her dreams, but they're all in the old format of videotapes. And he starts to interact with these things so that he can start finding out what her taxes owed are. It's really interesting because her initial dreams, the earlier ones as they go along, they're very different than what we've kind of been introduced to in the beginning part of the film. And he starts to develop a relationship with this woman in her dreams, as she's an elderly woman now, but as she was young in her dreams. And she basically starts to introduce that there may be something insidious going on, that there may be things that are being sold out to their dreams that are being inserted without our knowledge or consent. And it kind of goes on from there as to what is going to happen. I read somewhere that someone described this as micro-budget Terry Gilliam, and I would say that that's actually very true. This thing is incredibly small budget. When it opened up, I was like, wow, this is like something like Chris and I could have made, because it's like that, it's that low budget and cheap when they put it together. But as you go along, you just kind of go along with it, and it's incredibly creative, but it tries to reach beyond its capabilities as far as visually, but it's got some really interesting ideas in it, and it's got a lot of really cool set pieces that that can put you into its spot. It's a really out there film. I really enjoyed it. If you're of that mind, if you can get past the whole micro budget of the thing, it's quite an enjoyable ride. I gave it a B.
Now, it says, too, it has like a synth score with some
Yeah, it
strings as
does.
well. How was that? Would I have liked that? That's my thing.
Oh yeah. The score is great. I'm not a score guy personally, but I think this is one that Chris could get down with.
Nice. I gotta catch up with this one. All right, we got 2 left. Which one's it gonna be?
Oh,
Big money, no whammies. Wild Indian. I've heard some interesting, disparate kind of views of this film. I guess it's violence, particularly towards women. What's Wild Indian all about?
so Wild Indian is by an indigenous filmmaker, and it basically tells a story of a young boy on a reservation named Makwa back in the 80s, and his best friend slash cousin Tedo, who he hangs out with. Makwa is abused by his parents. His parents are alcoholics and neglectful. They physically abuse him. They emotionally abuse him. And he's a very isolated young boy, and he doesn't know what to do. One day while he's out in the woods with his friend Tedo, they have his uncle's 22, and he ends up shooting another young boy off of the reservation and killing him, and they cover up the murder. Then it flashes forward to the both of them as adults, and what the difference is between the two of them, of that one event, that how they both dealt with the guilt and how they moved forward. Makwa kind of rechristening himself as Michael and becoming this kind of high-powered person in corporate America, whereas Tedo has become consumed by his guilt and has become like a addict, drug dealer, criminal who just gets out of prison, and how the two kind of intersect and collide and kind of reconcile their past. It's a very lean film. It's a very quick film. It's only about an hour and a half. But honestly, Michael Greyeyes as Makwa the adult Makwa Michael is fantastic in this, as well as the actor who plays Tedo. They're both fantastic in what they do, and really kind of conveying the two different points of view and how they both handled it. There is violence in this, obviously, because Makwa, he's kind of bottled up his aggressions, and he kind of presents this face that he's this kind of, with it together, upstanding member of the community, this high-powered business person. He plays golf and all this kind of stuff. But then he kind of goes out and he hires dancers and prostitutes to allow him to, beat them up and stuff like that. So he's got this deep-seated core. I don't think it's particularly gratuitous necessarily. I think the violence is shocking, but it doesn't flinch away from it. But I think it fits for the story. I thought it was quite good. I thought it was a very interesting examination of kind of these two, like kind of what guilt does to you, and just kind of this view of what getting out of the reservation is like for these two individuals. And I think Michael Greyeyes is fantastic as Michael, the adult Makwa, and just he's able to turn from this kind of charming guy to like this absolutely terrifying person, like just in a heartbeat. And it's great. I really enjoyed it. I would give Wild Indian a B+.
Fantastic. I'll have to add that one to my list. All right, well, a little anticlimactic. We only got one left, but spin the old wheel.
Let's spin the wheel.
See if it actually comes up.
Okay.
Actually, no. We gotta talk about First Date again. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Let's go ahead and just do The Blazing World. Now, this one, the write-up looks really interesting, but I don't think I was able to get tickets in time for this one. So why don't you tell us what's about this? What's going on here?
So The Blazing World is by a filmmaker named Carlson Young, who wrote, directed, and starred in this. This is kind of an expansion of a short film that she did, also called The Blazing World, that premiered at Sundance in 2018. And this is kind of expanding that into a feature-length film. It's based off of a novel by the same name that I'm not familiar with. But essentially, Carlson Young, she plays a young woman whose sister died, her twin sister died decades ago while they were both children. And it's kind of dealing with the aftermath of all that. And then she is kind of on this search for meaning, and she discovers that she kind of gets transported a la Alice in Wonderland to another dimension where her sister may still be alive, and with the always creepy Udo Kier has to kind of confront these demons within this realm to try and get her sister back. It is a really well done surrealistic trip. Once you realize what's going on and kind of how this is all playing out and really what this is all about, it's really well done. But I think at the same time, she does a really good job of presenting this young woman as kind of this broken woman who's still able to kind of function at the same time, as well as kind of reaching for things that she's lost. The visuals are fantastic, and it gives you this kind of sense of foreboding that I really enjoyed. I have a soft spot for these kind of weird, out there, you really have to dig into the images to figure out what's going on type of film. And I think that's what you get with this. I think it's quite good. Dermot Mulroney is good as her alcoholic father, and Udo Kier is just creepy as all hell as this kind of this demonic entity that has been haunting her since she was a child. It's an interesting out there film. It's right in my wheelhouse, so I gave it a B plus. Straddled the line between a B plus and an A minus. I think I'm going to stick with a B plus, but it was by far my favorite film of the festival.
Fantastic, Matt. Well, thanks for doing all the heavy lifting and reporting from Sundance from your couch. So I think it was great that they made that an option, though, for people to buy tickets and stream these films this year. That was really smart and access to a lot of people.
I looked online just out of curiosity to see if any other films or film festivals were doing. There's actually quite a few through any that are scheduled from like now through March. A lot of them are having a streaming option for the public, so you can, because they're not having actual in-person viewing.
Right. Fantastic. Well, Matt, thanks for sharing with that. If you've seen any of those films, were you able to catch up with these Sundance hits? Go ahead and shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Matt, let's go ahead and close the big show out and share our 5 favorite films from 2020.
Hey. Jesus! Easy. It's okay. It's okay. Look, I know I look like the butcher, but it's Millie. This is gonna sound really strange.
Booker, look at me. He's crazy.
Okay, Booker, can you look at me, please? Please? Booker, please, can you look at me just for a second? Okay, so last night, our consciousness or our spirit, whatever you want to call it, okay, it traded places.
You're all going to jail for this. You too, Booker. Unless you help me. Booker!
Dry up, bitch.
Booker, help! Booker!
Will you shut up?
Booker!
Look, I know this is crazy, okay? And there's a lot of voices competing. You see my friends, Nyla and Jocelyn, they're on my side, okay? And this is clearly not me. Have you ever seen me dressed like that? I mean, I kind of like a lot of what he's doing with it, but it's the point is that you've never seen me dressed like that, right? Do you like that? It doesn't matter. I feel like I'm giving you a lot of information and you literally just woke up. Whew. You look great.
So, Matt, that is, of course, a clip from Freaky, from the writer-director of the Happy Death Day series. 2 really fun, interesting films. And I think Freaky actually is the best thing he's done so far. I try and dance around it because I want us to have a kind of a full show when we get around to it. But and what's funny is I think I forgot about it last time when we were doing our top 10. Part of me wonders if it should be in my 6 through 10, but I wanted to at least pay homage to it now. If you haven't seen Freaky, folks, I'm telling you, check it out. You will not be disappointed. Matt, start us off. What is your 5th favorite film of 2020?
All right, so my 5th favorite film, and so again, I'll reiterate what I did when I went through this is I looked at what grades I have. Anything that got at least a B plus were in the running. But my top 5 is either A's or A minuses. So I was as surprised as you are. My number 5 is going to be Cronenberg's Possessor, a whacked out film where, as we just talked about surrealistic images that I get all over, this is full of that. Basically, a woman is like a corporate assassin where basically she can take over the body of somebody and influence their actions and basically control them like a puppet while they subsume their real personality beneath that. And she takes over the body of a young man who is engaged to the daughter of a powerful businessman, and she is going to go in there and F shit up. And it becomes this battle of wills between her maintaining control over the body and the young man trying to reassert dominance and try and take his life back under control. It is a violent, crazy film that I honestly stuck with me for a long, long time. So it's definitely my number 5 for this year.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I have it as an honorable mention.
No,
but I never want to watch it again. Right? It is such a disturbing film that I don't know. I couldn't pull the trigger on that.
Okay.
So
I think you give it an A- with me, though. That just shows Chris has no integrity.
it is. That's exactly what that means. I think we've firmly established that over the past 10, 11 years. So my number 5 then is Spike Lee's *Da 5 Bloods*. Particularly, I think almost entirely based on the performance of Delroy Lindo. That man is a force in that film. And while we're recording this, the Golden Globes have been announced, and nary a mention, which just blows my mind. And we don't, in fact, you know my thoughts? My thoughts on the Golden Globes, especially this year, really deserves no recognition. So anyway, I think, though I don't think it's as successful as The Black Klansman, I think Spike Lee's film about these men who go back to Vietnam decades later to recover some buried treasure that they had hidden years ago, and basically the intervening years, what has happened to all of them, particularly one of the final performances by Chadwick Boseman. And given the resonance of his passing, watching that film again too, I just wonder what the impact of that would be. But still, some standout performances by the entire crew. May go a bit off the rails at the end, but I think is a film that demands your viewing, as I said, just because of Lindo, who should get an Academy Award nomination, if not a win. He is that good in this film, and it's my number 5.
All right. Very good. All right, so my number 4 is a quiet film. It's a First Cow. It's about the first cow in a New England colony, a young man who is kind of searching for a new life, teams up with a kind of a bit of a shyster, huckster character who also is living in the settlement, and they start stealing milk from the first cow that belongs to the kind of powerful governor in order to make and sell baked goods. And honestly, that's basically the whole plot of the film. And it is got an interesting framing story. And it's really, I just really liked it because it's just this examination of friendship by these two kind of different people who you wouldn't think would get together, and just this view of life back in colonial times America. I thought it was quite good. I thought the performances were excellent. I really enjoyed the kind of quiet pace of the film, so it's my number 4.
No, that's a good one. I like that one a lot as well. My number 4 then is a film that I think when I first saw it earlier this year, I was really one of my most anticipated films of 2020, and it's Eliza Hittman's Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. The story of a young woman played by Sydney Flanagan. She plays Autumn Callahan, who lives in this small town in Pennsylvania, and finds out that she's 17 years old, and she finds out she's pregnant. And she goes to get an abortion. She ends up having to go to a clinic in New York City. And it's basically just all the challenges that she encounters as she's just looking and desperately trying to get this procedure done. It really is a heartbreaking film. Another kind of quiet film like First Cow, featuring a fantastic performance by newcomer Sydney Flanagan. But it's all the micro aggressions that this young woman and women have to experience in order to get kind of this basic healthcare type thing. It's a sad and infuriating film with some really touching performances, beautifully shot by Hittman, and lots of understated challenges that she endures. It's one of the more interesting and challenging films of the year, and I don't know if enjoyed it is the right term, but it stuck with me for quite a while. That's for absolutely sure.
Yeah, it stuck with me as well. It's actually my number 3 as one of the only 3 A's I gave out this year. So Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is my number 3. I think it's accurate to say that I don't know if I enjoyed it either. I appreciated it for sure, because it is definitely a gut punch of a film. Just kind of watching this young woman trying to get this procedure done, and just the things that are aligned against her in her own family life, in her own town, and then just kind of this uncaring city that she's forced to kind of deal with, and the support of her cousin who goes along with her. It's a hard watch, but it's done so well, and I think everybody should watch it just to kind of get a better empathy of kind of what some of these young women have to face. So I would say I appreciated it very much. So it's my number 3.
No, that's good. I'm glad to see it on your list. My number 3 initially was going to be a cheat which was Steve McQueen's Small Axe anthology series on Amazon Prime. But I'm happy to be pinned down. And if I had to choose one of the films, which includes, of course, Mangrove, Red, White, and Blue, Alex Wheatle, Education, and then finally the one I would choose, which is Lovers Rock. All 5 of these films, Matt, are exceptional. And if you haven't seen them yet, they're all on Amazon Prime right now. Check them out. I watched them over a week. Lovers Rock is McQueen focusing on these 2 young lovers who meet at this reggae house party in 1980. All the films focus around the lives of these West Indian immigrants in London in the we go from the 60s through the 80s. It's really, each one of them is exceptionally well done. Lovers Rock, though, because it's the purest and the sweetest of all of them, it had the most emotional heft for me out of all the 5 films. And like I say, there's a lot of heavy hitters. Red, White, and Blue, with a commanding performance by John Boyega, who plays one of these immigrants who becomes a cop to try and fix the system from the inside and all the challenges he encounters. Alex Wheatle, which is based kind of the story of the black British novelist, is really good. Education is a film about a gentleman he's growing up and he doesn't do well in school, so he gets sent to a special school, which is supposed to be just as good as the regular schools, but clearly is not. And then the series opens with Mangrove, which is a story about a guy who's trying to straighten his life out and opening up a kind of restaurant coffee shop, and all the harassment that he experiences from the police as he tries to straighten his life out and do all that. But in the end, Lovers Rock was the purest and the most beautiful of the series. And if you can only watch one, that would be the one I would recommend. Just all these lives intersecting on this one summer night for their love of music and their culture and being with each other. It's just pure. There's a purity to it that I absolutely loved. So that's my 3.
All right. So my number 2 is a lush film by the director Terrence Malick, who I adore. It's A Hidden Life. It's about a man who acts as a conscientious objector in Austria during World War II. Basically, he's drafted to join the German army, and he refuses because he doesn't think that what they're doing is correct. So he is imprisoned, he is tortured, and it really is just a harrowing film that is just juxtaposed with these beautiful, beautiful Malick images. And I think it's an incredibly well put together film. I don't want to say too much about it, just because if you haven't seen it, I want you to go out and watch it. Be prepared for some German, but that's to be expected in this. But it's arguably the most beautiful film I've seen in 2020. So I'm going to go with Hidden Life.
Yeah, it didn't make my list, Matt, because it's a 2019 movie. It's U.S. release in December for the holiday season for the Oscars. So it didn't make my cut. Now, I know we've said that there are no rules for 2020. And I mean, for 2021, technically, I should say, because of stuff like Nomadland, which we didn't get to see. What else? Minari, Beanpole, Pieces of Woman, though it is available on Netflix, that one. The Sun, which is on Netflix as well. Really, Nomadland and Minari, I think, are the ones that were allowed me to break those rules. So I am going to reject your number 2 outright. My number 2, then, is a film you mentioned earlier, which is Kelly Reichardt's First Cow. Really, just a beautiful film about friendship and perhaps more between 2 men in 1820 as they try and build a life by making these desserts, right? By stealing the milk from the cow, and then all the consequences that may end up coming down upon them when and if they are eventually found out. But it is a quiet, contemplative film with some stunning imagery that is so much deeper than you would imagine just looking at the poster of this cow on a raft. But if you're familiar with Kelly Reichardt's film at all, one of my favorites, Wendy and Lucy, which is a film that just devastated me and which is what got me into her work. First Cow is right up there amongst her best. So it's my number 2.
All right. Well, I'm interested for this number 1 because I know what's coming next with Chris, just keeping track of what's been on his list. And I think he may be able to do the same if he was paying as much attention to me, but I don't know if he is. But it's interesting that my number 1 film both of our number one films came in the bottom half of from the last show. So my number one is Pixar's Soul. I think it's by far the most interesting film that we've got. There's so much to unpack here. There's just the nature of that they put out there in a kid's film about the afterlife and what you accomplish in your life and your family and just everything that's there. It's so much there to unpack that it can really affect anybody. And I was so impressed with Soul. It's probably one of the best Pixar films I've seen in a long time because it is just everything about it is just it's just successful. I mean, and granted, even when it dips a little bit, when it kind of dips into your typical cartoon slapstick territory, it's not enough to like really weigh it down from the beginning, middle, or ends of it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm really shocked that it's as low as it was on Chris's list. Which, that I just, Chris just doesn't have a sense of wonder anymore. That's what it comes down to.
I don't, not at all. So then, obviously, Matt, my favorite film of 2020. Go ahead and say it.
It's Promising Young Woman, which I'm shocked.
Emerald Fennell's Promising. Yeah, it's just that it's the slap in the face that I was hoping it would be. It's the ice water, dunking your head in the bucket of ice water. I think it's a prescient film that demands to be seen and is one of the more striking films of its time, and it really perfectly encapsulates everything that, unfortunately, a lot of women have to deal with, if not all, at some point throughout their lives. And features probably maybe my absolute favorite performance of 2020, which is Carey Mulligan, who is just a sheer force of nature in this thing, what she's able to deliver in this film. And also Bo Burnham, who does this turn. He did 8th Grade as a comedian, but his turn as her love interest and the journey that the relationship goes on. Listen, Matt, of all the films we watched this year, the one that had me almost jumping out of my seat was Promising Young Woman, with its turns and its thrills, the humor, the darkness, everything that happens in this film. It really just was my favorite experience. And maybe possibly it's colored by actually being able to see it in the theater too. One of the few films I got to see in the theater this past year. Right. But still, it is the one that had the biggest impact on me, the one that stayed with me. Its use of visuals, the music in it, really everything. It's almost pitch perfect. I absolutely adored Promising Woman and everything that it represents and is. So it was my favorite film of the year.
It's interesting. So for longtime listeners out there, you can listen to that. Chris's favorite film was what he described as a cold water slap in the face.
Hell yeah,
that's what he was looking for. Whereas my favorite film was an uplifting, reaffirming in the human spirit. So which one do you want to go with, guys?
That's true. Especially, with the last year we just had, you would think Soul would be the recommendation across the board for everybody. But not me, Matt. I want to grab you by the lapels. All right.
Things still suck. Don't you forget.
Exactly. I don't want, maybe things have changed politically in this world and the administrations, but it's not time to rest, Matt. There's still work to do. All right. Mm-hmm. It's not over. So that's what Promising Woman is for me. Matt, any honorable mentions? Anything you didn't mention that didn't make the cut for you, I should say? And
So Borat, subsequent movie film, would be an honorable mention for me. I don't think this would make an honorable mention for Chris, but I really had a good time with Greyhound. I thought that was a fun war movie. Color Out of Space, The Invisible Man, The Wretched, Just Mercy, and On the Rocks. Oh, and Defy Bloods.
There you go. Matt, I got to tell you, you got to check out those Steve McQueen films on Prime.
All right.
Stuff also, I think you may have been on your list. So Sound of Metal, Vast of Night, I enjoyed. I've come around on I'm thinking of ending things. I don't know why. I've softened on that. I think I like it a lot more than I did when we first discussed it. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, one of the few films I've watched twice. The 40-Year-Old Version, again, a film I liked a lot more than Matt did. And I did mention Underwater, and of course I've been praising Freaky from start to finish, really. So, all right, there it is. What was your favorite film of the year? Your 5 favorite? Your 10? I don't care. Lay it on me. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Matt, next week back to your regularly scheduled programming. We're going to be checking out The Little Things. Jared Leto with a Golden Globe nomination for that film, so we'll have to see what that's all about. And then finally, the Amazon Prime film, was it Wolf Walkers? We'll be discussing that as well and more. So come on back next week, y'all here. Same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime, find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for The First Run. Scroll. Eventually you will find us. Go ahead to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. It'll help other people find the show, and we will read it on the air because I love you. Let's go ahead and take an extended break. And I'm going to go with the rest in peace, Hal Holbrook, one more time.
Forget the myths that the media's created about the White House. The truth is, these are not very bright guys, and things got out of hand.